It looked like the end of the world arriving on a quiet Thursday morning, September 16, 1999. A local fisherman named Andy Smith drove to Lake Jackson, just north of Tallahassee, Florida. He expected to find stillness, glassy water, the promise of a good catch. Instead, he found a river where a lake should be. A churning, muddy vortex, pulling trees, branches, and the lake itself into a roaring hole in the ground. It was, in his words, like somebody pulled the plug in a bathtub, a 4,000-acre bathtub. Before we pull the plug on this mystery, drop a comment. What do you think swallows a 12-billion-gallon lake? An earthquake? A secret government project? The truth is far stranger. So many of you watch these deep dives and then forget to subscribe. If this channel is going to survive and keep digging into stories everyone else ignores, we need you to join us. It's one click for you, but for us, it's a signal to keep going. Do it now. It matters. Okay, let's begin. This wasn't a leak. It was an amputation. Over the next several days, somewhere between 6 and 10 billion gallons of water disappeared from Lake Jackson. Not evaporated, not siphoned off. It was swallowed whole by the earth, vanishing into a 75-foot wide sinkhole on the lakebed known as the Porter Hole Sink. The water level dropped 12 feet. 70 to 90% of the lake's surface area emptied out, leaving behind a scarred, desolate landscape of mud, stranded fish, and forgotten history. An entire ecosystem, gone. It was a geological catastrophe that played out in slow motion, and almost no one saw it coming. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It wasn't a catastrophe, it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't the first time. It was a feature, not a bug. The lake was just doing what it has always done, disappearing, and it was about to happen again. To understand how a lake can simply vanish, you have to understand the ground beneath Florida. It is not solid. By any measurement, the entire state is a lie. It appears stable, a sunny paradise of beaches and retirement communities, built on firm ground. But underneath, the state is hollow. It's a porous, honeycombed platform of limestone and dolomite, a geological formation known as karst topography. For millions of years, rainwater, naturally acidic, has seeped through the soil, dissolving that soft rock. It carved out a secret, subterranean world of caves, tunnels, and massive underground rivers. This network is the Floridan Aquifer, one of the most productive aquifers on the entire planet. It is the hidden plumbing system that provides drinking water for millions of people. And lakes like Jackson are not separate from it. They are a part of it, a window into it. Geologists have a name for this. They call Lake Jackson a prairie lake, a karst window. Think of it as a shallow bowl sitting on top of that limestone sponge. And in the bottom of that bowl are drains, two major ones, Lime Sink in the southeast, and the main culprit, Porter Hole Sink in the north. Those drains are not made of solid rock. They are not sealed. They are plugged with an unstable mixture of sand, clay, sediment, and organic junk that has washed into the lake over decades. This fragile plug is the only thing holding billions of gallons of water in place. It's the only thing separating a thriving 4,000-acre lake from a mud pit. And the stability of that plug depends entirely on pressure. When the Floridan Aquifer is full, water pressure pushes up from below, helping to hold the plug firmly in its socket. But during a drought, the opposite happens. The aquifer level drops. The upward pressure disappears. Now the full weight of the lake is pressing down on that fragile seal of mud and debris. If the lake's own water level also drops far enough due to lack of rain, the delicate balance is broken. The plug gets flushed out, washed down into the caverns of the aquifer, like soap scum down a drain. And the lake follows right behind it. The 1999 event was not an anomaly. It was a pattern. Lake Jackson has a long and well-documented history of pulling this disappearing act. 1886, 1907, 1909, 1932, another in 35, and again in 36, then 1957, and a major drainage in 1982. The lake empties, it panics the locals, the rains return, the sinkhole eventually clogs itself back up with new sediment, and the lake refills. A cycle of death and rebirth written into the landscape itself. The officials at the Florida Geological Survey, people like Assistant State Geologist Harley Means, aren't surprised. They're resigned. They describe it in the calm, measured tones of people who have accepted that nature is in charge. The lake is essentially a bowl, Means has said. and in the bottom of the bowl are a couple of holes that are drains. Those drains are connected to the Floridan Aquifer, and that plug can get removed, and when it does, the lake drains." End quote. It's that simple, and that terrifying. I want to hear from you again in the comments. Have you ever seen a sinkhole in person? What did it look like? The sheer power of these things is hard to grasp. I read all of the comments. What's left behind when a lake dies? Not emptiness, a hidden world. Each time Lake Jackson drains, it becomes a temporary archaeological site. The receding water exposes a history that has been submerged for decades, even centuries. After the 1982 drainage, the muddy lakebed yielded treasures. Ancient dugout canoes, some estimated to be hundreds of years old, carved by the region's original Native American inhabitants. Pottery from the Fort Walton culture, the same people who built the ceremonial mounds that still stand on the lake's shore inside the Lake Jackson Mounds Archaeological State Park. These weren't artifacts in a museum. They were sitting in the mud, waiting for someone to find them. But it's not just ancient history, it's our history. The drainages become impromptu environmental cleanups. Decades of garbage that was thrown or sunk into the lake is suddenly revealed. During the cleanups that followed the 1982 and 1999 events, locals and state agencies pulled out thousands of tires, bottles, cans, sunken boats, and in one instance, a car that had been reported stolen in the 1960s, sitting silently on the lake floor, finally exposed to the sun after 40 years in the dark. And then there are the fish. What happens to the animals when their world is literally pulled out from under them? As the water funnels into the porterhole sink, it creates a powerful vortex, a liquid tornado. Thousands upon thousands of fish, bass, bream, catfish, are helplessly sucked into the swirl. They are pulled down through the 75-foot wide opening and flushed into the darkness of the Floridan Aquifer, a fishnado. Many are killed by the pressure and turbulence, but biologists believe some survive, finding a new, lightless home in the vast underground caverns. The water from the lake doesn't disappear, it just relocates to the aquifer, and it takes the wildlife with it. For a moment, could you hit the like button if you're finding this story as wild as I am? It's a huge help. And if you have friends or family who love a good mystery or live anywhere with questionable geology, share this video. They need to know what's under their feet. The cycle is so predictable and so destructive to the man-made infrastructure around it that you would think someone would have tried to stop it. They did, and they failed, miserably. After the repeated drainages in the mid-20th century, and especially after the 1982 event, there was a concerted push to fix the problem. The idea was simple: plug the hole, permanently. Engineers came up with a plan to cap the porterhole sink, dump enough concrete, earth, and material into the sinkhole to seal it for good, to tame the lake and force it to behave like a normal, predictable body of water. It was an arrogant plan, born from a belief that human engineering could conquer any natural inconvenience. They tried. They dumped tons of material, they spent money and manpower, and the lake just laughed. Tom Scott, another geologist with the Florida Geological Survey, summed up the problem perfectly. The power of that water is immense. The sheer force generated by billions of gallons of water seeking its level, rushing into a subterranean void, is not something you can stop with a few truckloads of concrete. It's like trying to plug a fire hydrant with a wad of chewing gum. Nature's plumbing proved far more powerful than human engineering. The fix failed. The next time the conditions were right, the plug would be flushed out again. The lake would drain again. The cycle was not broken. It was just waiting. This phenomenon isn't unique to Lake Jackson. Florida is riddled with these geological trapdoors. 40 miles south of Gainesville lies Lake Alachua, or what used to be Lake Alachua. Today, it's a vast prairie, but for centuries it has oscillated between being a massive lake and a grassy plain, draining and refilling through a sinkhole, just like Lake Jackson. A more recent, and even more dramatic example took place in the heart of Florida's Sinkhole Alley. In June of 2006, residents near Scott Lake in Lakeland, Polk County, noticed something wrong. The 318-acre lake was shrinking, fast. Over 2 weeks, a newly opened sinkhole on the lake bed, this one about 120 feet wide, swallowed an estimated 1.8 billion gallons of water. The lake level dropped a staggering 17 feet. Docks were left hundreds of feet from the new shoreline. The lake's surface area was cut in half. It was Lake Jackson all over again, just on a slightly smaller scale. A billion gallons here, a few billion there. Across Florida, the ground gives way. After 1999, Lake Jackson did what it always does. The rains came back. The aquifer level rose. Sediment flowing into the Porterhole sink eventually clogged the drain. Slowly, painstakingly, the lake began to refill. For 2 decades, it held. It looked like a permanent feature of the landscape once more. People fished on it, built homes on its shores, and forgot about the void that slept just beneath the surface. The memory of the great disappearance faded. Then came 2021. A prolonged period of low rainfall settled over the Florida Panhandle. A drought. The same conditions that preceded the 1999 event returned. Aquifer levels dropped. The lake level dropped. The pressure balance shifted. And in April 2021, the plug gave way. Again. This time, people were watching. News crews filmed from helicopters as the northern part of Lake Jackson once again transformed into a swirling, muddy mess. The vortex at Porterhole Sink was back. Within days, huge portions of the lakebed were exposed, a familiar scar on the landscape. The scene was a near-perfect replay of 1999. This time, however, there was an organized response. As thousands of fish were being stranded in shrinking, isolated pools of warm water, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, or FWC, launched a rescue operation. Along with local volunteers, they waded through the mud with nets, capturing as many fish as they could. They weren't saving them from being sucked into the aquifer, they were saving them from suffocating in the mud as their pools evaporated under the Florida sun. It was a frantic, desperate effort to mitigate a natural event that they were powerless to stop. Tens of thousands of fish were relocated to other parts of the lake that still held water, a small victory in the face of an overwhelming geological process. By June of 2021, just a couple of months later, heavy summer rains arrived. The aquifer began to recharge. The sinkhole, as it always does, began to clog itself. The lake started to fill. The cycle was complete once more. All right, I know this is the second time I'm asking, but the data is staring me in the face. A shocking percentage of the people who watch these investigations to the very end aren't subscribed. Let's change that right now. It is the single best way to ensure we can keep making them. I'll wait. Awesome. You are the reason this channel exists. Now, back to the giant hole in the ground. So, the water isn't lost forever. That's the key takeaway that the geologists stress. When Lake Jackson drains, it's performing a massive, unscheduled recharge of the Floridan Aquifer. That water, the same water that millions of Floridians get from their taps, is being filtered through limestone and returned to the system. From a purely hydrological perspective, it's a net positive. The system is working as designed, but we don't live in a purely hydrological world. We live in a world of property values, billion-dollar infrastructure, and economic expectations. A world where a lake is supposed to be a lake, not a sometimes lake, sometimes mud pit. The people who built homes and businesses on the shores of Lake Jackson did so with the expectation of a permanent waterfront view, not a cyclical bog. Sean McGlynn, a former manager of the Lake Jackson Mounds Park, has a more philosophical perspective. He sees the draining not as a failure, but as a unique part of the lake's identity. It's one of the things that makes Lake Jackson special, he said. These lakes are temporary features of the landscape, and we happen to live in a time where we get to experience that cycle. It's a beautiful way to look at it, but it conceals an uncomfortable question. Lake Jackson is special, yes, but the geology that makes it special is not unique. It is the foundation of the entire state. What happened at Lake Jackson in 1999 and 2021, and at Scott Lake in 2006, is a demonstration of a fundamental vulnerability. The ground beneath Florida is not as solid as it looks. The plumbing that governs its water supply is ancient, unpredictable, and prone to catastrophic failure. The numbers associated with Lake Jackson are staggering, up to 10 billion gallons, a 4,000-acre lake, a 12-foot drop in water level. But these are natural events in a largely natural setting. Now, imagine a similar geological failure under a multi-billion-dollar theme park, under a hospital, under the foundation of a 50-story condominium on the coast. Florida's population is booming. The state is growing at a historic rate, with new developments paving over more and more of that karst landscape. Every new road, every new parking lot, every new subdivision alters the way water moves through the ground. It concentrates runoff in new areas, potentially increasing pressure on weak points in the underlying limestone. It puts more people and more critical infrastructure directly on top of a geological system that is inherently unstable. The problem is, you don't know where the next plug will be pulled. Sinkholes can open anywhere, at any time, often with no warning. Most are small, a minor inconvenience. But some are large enough to swallow houses. Some are large enough to swallow lakes. The story of Lake Jackson is not just a quirky piece of local Florida lore. It's a warning. It demonstrates, in the most graphic way possible, the power of the natural systems that we build our lives on top of. We can try to plug the holes, to engineer our way around the inconvenience. But the forces at play are geological in scale, operating on timelines that make a human lifespan look like a rounding error. The power of water moving through soluble rock is a force of creation and destruction that has shaped the entire peninsula. Did the residents of Tallahassee see a disaster in 1999? Or did they just witness the normal, healthy function of an ecosystem they'd misunderstood? The lake didn't die. It just went home for a while. It drained into the very aquifer that gives the state life. But the spectacle it created serves as a permanent reminder. We live on the surface, on a thin crust of stability. But we are all subject to the plumbing underneath. And sometimes, somebody pulls the plug. The real question isn't whether Lake Jackson will vanish again. It will. The question is, what have we built on top